His Excellency the Vice President, Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, abusafo ene wa address oman no and the vision na ne so. Ohyase with his candidacy or the reasoning tie atwa se Ghana fo timi to aba no de emane no ana okasa de efa over 7 years going into 8 years under the leadership of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Nioma omatimi a TV and afi so to also talking of the vision and afi so the plans done and so and then a whole lot and ambition for can't want them. Now after say Bawumia Bekasa, some of the reactions I drop it by analysis, I drop it by someone for APP, NDC reaction, and then Ghana for someone more after Bawumia and message in a vision. TV. Emra.
I like some of the, I like a lot of the things he said. There are some that I disagree, but of course it's not all about me. I like the bit about the private sector, playing a major role in infrastructure development. Now, these are things we've talked about. We've talked about the fact that it's obvious government cannot do a lot of the things. It's obvious that a lot of our roads need to be developed and tolled, okay? So many of us were against, for instance, the removal of road tolls. We said that that should be maintained and in fact even should be increased under certain circumstances, because if you have major world-class roads, you'd have to toll them to make money. So, I mean, that's something that it's important. We've also talked about, he tells us, for instance, how he intends to go about taxation, for instance. He wants to have a flat rate for a lot of, the SMEs and private businesses that would occupy 98% of it. I didn't hear the percentage that he wants to give us a flat rate. I think that's something that would come up when, discussions are held further. He's talked about wanting to have, not more than 50 ministers. For me, that's a good thing. I mean, the good thing about this election is that now we're hearing, John Mahama had talked about not more than 60 ministers. He talks about not more than 50 ministers. And so we're getting to a scene where all of them are committing to lean governments. And for me, that's the most important thing. On the whole, earlier we were talking about the fact that he cannot come and pretend as if he's not, been part of a government. Yes, he's part of a government. He's talked about what they have done. Some of the things I rehash, a lot of the things I rehash of what we already know. So when it comes to all the things they've done. But when it comes to the vision, on the face of all that I have heard, looks like a good vision, but we will begin to do the analysis from tomorrow. And so from tomorrow on the Super Morning Show, we'll have a lot to say about what these things do.
And the fundamental question we were asking ourselves at the beginning of this, when we're told that this was a speech to create that departure between himself and his current boss, did he deliver that? And there are a few things he said that sort of emphasizes that point, because we're told to expect that today he will show us that he's different in policy and in action. Then a few things. One, the most controversial tax handle currently, which the government had asked the ECG to implement, was a 15% on VAT. This was what he said about that. He said the new policies that I am proposing to implement in 2025 will give us a fiscal space to eliminate some taxes, such as VAT on electricity. He says, if still on the books, in other words, he's saying he will abolish the 15% on VAT if it's still on the books, if he wins in 2025. But you see the way he puts it, fiscal space, he puts it within the fiscal space question, right? And that to give fiscal space to eliminate some taxes, you create in essence saying, I want to create a fiscal space first.
Yeah.
When I create a fiscal space, I will abolish the 15% on electricity if it's still on the books. As we see tonight, government has written to ECG and NETCO to tell them to suspend the plan implementation, right? So that's one. The most categorical for me.
But that point also. That point. If you're able to create fiscal space, that's a condition.
Yeah.
Which we say will be sufficient condition to implement it. I don't think we need a sufficient condition. Tell us, you want to abolish it, and that's the end of it. And so he's talked about a lot of things. And let me just chip this in before you go on to your point, because he also talks about how he thinks that government should not be buying a lot of things, they should be leasing things. I want to know, I want to see the figures. Not just say, so for instance, would it be cheaper for government to lease? Would it be cheaper for government to buy? Let's appreciate these things. I mean, I'm sure they may have worked the figures before coming out to say them. Let's know, for instance, so if a V8 goes for 180,000, just by purpose of analysis, dollars, if you're renting it or if you're leasing, okay, if you're leasing it over a period, over the 5-year period you want to lease it, how much is that going to cost you? The wear and tear, who's going to take care of it? All of these things are things we can actually check and we can do the analysis later on. If it's cheaper, why not?
Yeah, and then he also makes the point, and this was very categorical, that the E-levy will be abolished under him. He says he will abolish the E-levy. And for me, this was the most categorical he's ever been on, in essence, saying, well, I disagreed with my own government on this. They did this without my knowledge, or well, without my blessing, and if I get opportunity as my own man, I will abolish it. Because what's the point? He's a chair of the economic management team. Currently, as we speak tonight, he is. As we speak tonight, E-levy is still on our books. You've paid today when you transferred your Momo. But the man who is the chair of the economic management team, who is the vice president, who still sits in cabinet, who still chairs it, says, if I get opportunity to become president, I will abolish it. He's telling you very loudly that I did not support this when it came to cabinet and there was a debate. At the economic management team, if it did, and I expect that there's a huge tax handle like this will definitely come to the economic management team, I chaired it, and somehow I was still overruled. How? That screams a lot when he makes that declaration. For a policy that is still being implemented, Vice President says, when you give me the chance, I will abolish it. But he says the tone at the top, didn't he? When he says, well, I am the driver's mate now, and I'm looking for the money to be my own man, and when I get that authority, I will abolish something that is currently being implemented under my watch.
I see it this way also. And so the Vice President, when he was talking about his tax system, tax reform, talks about how it's estimated that, how much we do not get to collect is in excess of some 13% of GDP. That's over about $24 billion, over 240 billion Ghana cedis. Okay, so he's talking about putting in place measures to be able to collect all of these. And that's why he's introducing a flat rate for SMEs and all of that. And we have said all the time, that where there's a favorable tax regime, people do not avoid or people do not evade. So I hear him saying, this is what I intend to do. And based on that, so when he creates fiscal space, now E-levy, he wants to create a fiscal space of, for instance, 3% of GDP. And if we're looking at GDP for 2024, which is expected to be about the total output, I thought to be about some 1 trillion, then 3%, you're looking at some 30 billion. Currently, E-levy will be raking in less than 3 billion Ghana cedis. So that means that if you do all of these things, you would have enough revenue, okay? You have enough space and would not need E-levy. He's talked about a lot of cost-cutting measures. He's talked about running a lean government. He's talked about other things which he believes would help the government. So all of these things will lead to the abolishing of the E-levy. But this is the point also. The Vice President has consistently shied away from the E-levy conversation.
Yeah.
And that would give an indication that he may not have been in support of it. But of course, it wouldn't have made sense earlier to go out there to say, I am not in support of it. His action today would suggest, you can reasonably infer, that he was not in support of it. And some of the things that he's not in support of, he wants to say, he now says, I would abolish them. But this is the other point also. In doing so, because he's talking about creating space, cutting down a lot of things, which would free a lot of expenditure, that would make sense. Because if you have all of these things, then you can move on and say, I don't need to, for instance, burden people with a 15% VAT on electricity.
No, but that particular intervention, he says he will implement if the 50% is still on VAT in 2025, raises fundamental questions. As we know, it was part of the IMF program. proposals that we put before the IMF. And this program is different from what we used in the past when the IMF dictated to us and we had to negotiate. This is bring your own program. Tell us what you want to do to achieve these set targets, fiscal targets, etc. And then we discuss if indeed they will deliver on that, then you go ahead and implement. So in other words, a 15% VAT is what government went to the IMF with. Now, it begs the question. It must have come through cabinet.
It did.
It must have gone through the economic management team, which he chairs. It must have. Let's assume he didn't even go to that. It must have come through cabinet. He definitely was in cabinet when he saw this particular one go through, right? Before it was passed. People ask the question, but why didn't you do enough to stop it there? Why wait till 2025 when a lot of people would have suffered as a result of that, possibly drag more people into poverty because they are paying 50% on VAT, etc. When that question is asked of him, and that question will be asked tomorrow, I'm sure you'll be asking that question on the Super Morning Show, on PMS, I'll be asking, what's the most, it's a difficult question, but what's the most plausible answer to that?
Because I'll be asking the question.
You don't want to,
I don't want to answer the question.
but that's a big one.
Yes.
Because this is something that the government went to the IMF with.
I mean, I can actually join you in, adding further to that and
more
saying, questions to that and saying, so at what point in time did you realize that this was a bad one? Was it when he was going to Parliament? Couldn't you have done anything to stop it? Is it going to be business as usual to say, I was the driver's mate and I wasn't the man in charge, and so now I want to do this? Well, let's see what the response is.
And it's also fair then to ask, okay, so because of what he says about E-levy, that he abolished, and the conclusion there is very obvious that I didn't support this when it came to cabinet and the economic management team, it's fair to then ask him, okay, so we understand you're not the boss, so you don't have the final say. You can scream and kick all you want. If the boss said that's what I want, eventually you have to play ball or you resign, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you stayed in. If you stayed in, we want to. So what did you do to oppose it? And how far did you go? When, especially in the case of the 15%, because it was our proposal. When that document came before cabinet, did he see it? What did he do specifically to oppose it and to raise the challenges this will pose to the people, or this was something that was sneaked in the end? I mean, those are questions that... Did he, for
instance, inform the president when he told the president, because he's the driver's mate, so he would have discussions with the driver.
Yeah.
Was his argument solid enough to have convinced the president? Did he propose some of the things he's proposing now to the president, that we can actually do these and create enough fiscal space? So you want to know, well, whether all of these things happened and were they solid arguments? Did the president refuse all of these?
I want to take us right now to the premises of the UPSA, where Dr. Bawumia just finished addressing the country. I want to bring in my colleague Kojo Brace, who's having an interaction with the Director of Communications for the MPP, Ms. Ahiagba.
That if we make Bawumia the president, this Mineral Development Bank will come in and will give us the opportunity to be able to exploit and leverage our resources for our benefit.
But you agree with me that same happened with the $1 million per constituency, sources of the sources of funds. So it's right, we have to find out where are the funds coming from. We have to understand it from now to be able to make a good judgment.
Well, if you keep asking that question, then I can tell you that you have doubts in your mind about what is possible. It is possible. You must have the right dream, and he has a doing this, and you agree that having a mineral development bank is a good idea. And if it's a good idea, we have the minerals, we can leverage our minerals to generate the revenue to be able to do that.
But the $1 million per constituency was a good idea, but you couldn't do it.
Well, those are two different things. And these are two different leaders who are pointing forward with a new vision. And we believe that with this, look, you see the 1 million, one constituency, people keep saying that it didn't materialize, but it did materialize. It only didn't materialize in the form people expected. The people were thinking that 1 million would be given to the MP or to a constituency, but it was managed through the Special Initiative Ministry to create and invest in infrastructure projects.
Like
that
what?
Was done. Oh, but you are aware of all the special...
Those KVIPs are still, they're not uncompleted, yeah.
You are the journalist. You have to go and investigate and find the result. I told you, you know about the one constituency, one ambulance. It's part of that. That is there. So let's talk about it. If there are challenges, let's talk about it. But the initiative was carried out, and I think that we can intensify and make sure that initiative continues to help, but it is nothing to compare with a new vision that Bawumia is bringing, which is to create a mineral development bank to help us leverage and benefit as a country from our mineral resources.
Richard, I'm grateful to you, sir, for coming. Well, so let's bring in the trades, those people who are involved in the business world. And let me bring in someone who is really, when it comes to importation, it plays a key role there. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Why, you don't know the name?
Oh, no. I know. I just want us to go straight to this conversation. Now, you heard him talk about the ports, how they want to make business,
As Kojo Brace have an interaction with the CIBID, who represents the importers and exporters there. And you want to join us at 9 p.m. tonight, but also on the Super Morning Show tomorrow. Tomorrow,
yes. We have a great conversation. We will, in detail, in depth, review everything that he said. And yeah, so join us. He's talked about, I've just been looking at the speech from around page 38 to about 70, he talks about his vision. So more than 30 pages talking about his vision. We want to, analyze all of it in detail, look at the feasibility or otherwise of it. So that's what we'll be doing tomorrow on the Super Morning Show.
Okay, you want to join Winston, because one of the things we'll definitely be doing is fact-checking. Sure. Because a lot has been said tonight that is begging for that. Bawumia himself believes in the importance of facts, so we'll do that also. PM Express in 30 minutes. Under 30 minutes, we'll also be beginning to dissect this a bit more. We'll look at this from the point of view of his own people to digest a bit more of what he had said, but also analyzing the messaging. Sometimes the form is more important than the substance. In this case, both were equally important. He needed to show us in what he says and how he said it, his body language, even the way he was dressed, to show that I am different from the man I've served. We will analyze the soft bits too when he joined us on PM Express, and his relationship with the finance minister was one that I was watching out for, especially when he categorically said.
I didn't see the finance minister. Did you see him?
I didn't see him there too. Maybe he was there. We haven't seen him.
No, that's what I said. I didn't see him.
I didn't see him too. Yeah. But I heard him mention the finance minister once, not by name, but by designation. And he was thanking the economic actors who have helped to improve the economy in the midst of the crisis. Do you know who he thanked?
Go ahead.
He thanked the governor of the central bank. Yeah. He was clear about how the governor of the central bank, and he says the criticism they've received is unfair. You know who else has received criticism? And they said he should leave his job, and party folks camped, and gunned against him. You know who?
Ken?
Well, you know him. He didn't say that was unfair. In fact, he didn't mention him at all. There's something he said, though. He mentioned him once. And when he was mentioning him, in the context of emphasizing what he, as an individual, had done. And I'll read it, and then we'll end. I know tomorrow, this is something that you touch on also. He says, so when we assumed office in 2017 as vice president, I made the decision, with the blessings and support of the president, to focus on the critical but underdeveloped systems that would expand the economy, improve systems, and create jobs through digitalization. Therefore,